Just like that, a month of the college football season is already in the books. I didn't do a top 25 last week, and I had a lot of people asking in my comments where my top 25 was. So no need to worry, we are back this week. So after week 5 of the college football season, here are my top 25 teams. Before we get to today's rankings, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. We have a brand new number 1 this week, as number 4 Alabama took down number 2 Georgia in probably the game of the year and one of the best college football games we've seen pretty much maybe in the last decade. Now, I know Alabama almost blew this one after having the massive lead, but still taking down Georgia, who many people believed was the best team in college football, this was quite the win for the Tide. Jalen Milroe just might be the Heisman favorite after this performance, as he threw for just under 400 yards with 2 passing touchdowns. He also completed 27 of 33 passes. In addition, he led the Tide with 117 yards on the ground with 2 rushing scores. Oh, and if you didn't know already, Ryan Williams is one of the better wide receivers in all of college football, as he finished the game with just under 200 total yards. I wasn't that high in Alabama entering the season, but after this game, they've definitely changed my mind. Texas took down Mississippi State 35-13. Although they won by 3 scores, this game was a little bit close, as they were up by only 1 score entering the half. Arch Manning got the start, and he completed 26 of 31 passes for 325 yards and had 2 passing touchdowns. Texas still looks the part, and if you want to have them as your number 1 team, I'm not going to argue with that. Ohio State picked up the easy victory as they took down Michigan State 38-7. Will Howard was great once again, as he threw for 250 yards and had 2 passing touchdowns. The Buckeyes are 4-0 and they've dominated all 4 of their games, but they haven't played a really good opponent just yet. Well, they get to host Iowa this weekend, so it'll be interesting to see how this Buckeyes team fares against an actually decent opponent. Sliding down to number 4 is Georgia. Now this one was tough for me because they were down by like 30 points against Alabama, so you could have them even lower, but they did come back and they honestly could have won this game at the end, which really would have solidified them as the best team in the country. Carson Beck looked horrible in the first half, but in the second half he was an entirely different quarterback, as he finished the game with 440 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Despite a rough first half, I still think Georgia is one of the best teams in all of college football. Tennessee didn't play this weekend, so here's where I got them ranked. Penn State picked up a pretty big victory this weekend as they took down number 19 Illinois. Now, although they won by 2 scores, this was a pretty close game, as it was only a 1-possession game late in the 4th quarter. But Penn State's defense stepped up, and that's the reason why they won this game. Oregon went on the road to UCLA and won by 21 points. Despite this being such a big victory, it was actually kind of a really gross game for Oregon. They dominated in the first half, but they looked terrible in the second half. Overall, I know Oregon is 4-0 on the season, but they just haven't really looked all that impressive at any point this year. I guess their best win came on the road at Oregon State a couple weeks ago, but looking at Oregon State, if that's your best win of the year through the first month, that's not a great resume up until this point. Miami is still undefeated, but it's because of a very controversial win that they had against Virginia Tech last Friday. Despite what you think of that game, a win is still a win, and the Hurricanes are still undefeated. Cam Ward threw for 350 yards with 4 passing touchdowns, and he's right near the top of Heisman lists. Before we get to the rest of my rankings, I'd like to share with you guys how you can make the college football season more exciting and even win some money. I've partnered with Underdog Fantasy to bring you this amazing deal. If you download the Underdog Fantasy app and use promo code Harris, they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. That's right, they're giving you up to $1,000 of free money. You can choose your favorite players from every game and decide whether or not they'll go higher or lower than their projections. So to add a little extra excitement to every game and win some money, make sure to use promo code Harris for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000 at Underdog Fantasy. You guys can also sign up using the link in my description as well. Missouri didn't play this weekend, so here's where I got them ranked. This one ended up being a lot closer than it needed to be, as Michigan escaped with a 3-point victory over Minnesota. Now, I say escaped because they entered the 4th quarter winning 24-3. They were outscored by Minnesota 21-3 in the fourth quarter, and the Wolverines nearly lost. It feels kind of gross having Michigan this high because I just don't think they've been all that impressive of a team this year. They've played 5 games, and honestly in 4 of those, I wasn't all that impressed. It's just that last weekend, they had a massive victory against a top 15 team in USC. But even in that game, they needed a late fourth quarter drive to pull off the win. So yeah, Michigan is still technically a top 10 to 15 team, but I honestly don't believe they're that good. Now obviously if they keep on winning, they're going to stay a top 10 to 15 team, but I still think that there are a lot of teams that are better than them at this point in the year. It wasn't looking good in the first half as USC trailed Wisconsin 21-10, but they outscored the Badgers 28-0 in the second half and finished with the comfortable victory. Miller Moss threw for over 300 yards with 3 passing touchdowns as this USC offense looks like they are the real deal. LSU had an easy one as they defeated South Alabama 42-10. Garrett Nussmeier lit up the stat sheet by throwing for over 400 yards with 2 passing touchdowns. Outside of that week 1 loss to USC, in which LSU could have won, this Tigers team looks really good this year, and they can make a potential run in the SEC. This was an ugly game for Ole Miss as they fell at home to Kentucky by 3 points. Kentucky's been an up and down team so far this season, but they've proven that their defense is legit, as we saw what they did to Georgia a couple weeks ago. Jackson Dart had an off game by his standards, and the offense just looked terrible for the Rebels. This was the first major test for Ole Miss this season, and they blew it. Don't look now, but BYU is 5-0 on the season after their road victory against Baylor. I know beating Baylor isn't all that impressive of a victory, but the Cougars are still 5-0, and they did pick up a very impressive victory at home last weekend against Kansas State. I believe the Cougars were picked to finish something like 13th in the Big 12 this year, so the fact that they've started 5-0 and they're in the hunt for the Big 12 title, they are one of the more surprising teams in all of college football this season. Notre Dame has bounced back nicely since they fell at home to Northern Illinois as they knocked off number 15 Louisville 31-24. The Irish were in control for most of the game, but they did let Louisville kind of get back in it late in the fourth quarter, and this became an interesting game. Still, this was a very impressive victory all the way around from Notre Dame. I'm still a little uncertain with how good of a team Notre Dame truly is this season, but anytime you pick up a top 15 victory, you still gotta tip your hat to them. After getting absolutely embarrassed in week 1, Clemson has bounced back nicely. They took down Stanford by 24 points this weekend, and they've won 3 straight games. Cade Klubnik looks like an entirely different quarterback as he had 300 yards of offense with 5 total touchdowns this weekend. I may have been a little too harsh on Clemson after week 1, but it's looking like they might be one of the better teams in all of college football this season. Coming out of nowhere this year is Iowa State, who moved to 4-0 with their 20-0 victory over Houston. I know I just talked about BYU as probably being the biggest surprise this year in college football, but Iowa State's got to be up there as well. I wasn't expecting them to start the season 4-0, and I didn't think they'd be a Big 12 contender at this point. Kansas State dominated number 20 Oklahoma State, winning 42-20. The Wildcats have a number of impressive victories this season, and if it wasn't for that loss last week against BYU, I would have them inside my top 10. Avery Johnson continues to get better every week as he threw for 260 yards with 3 passing touchdowns while also adding 60 yards on the ground with 2 rushing scores as well. They also have one of the better running backs in all of college football in DJ Giddens, who ran for just under 200 yards this week. Like I said, that loss really hurt Kansas State last weekend, but I truly believe that this Wildcats team is a top 10 to 15 team in all of college football. It was a rough game for Utah, who suffered their first loss of the year as they fell to Arizona at home 23-10. The Utes are still missing Cameron Rising, and like I've said before, they're only going to go as far as he's able to take them. Without Rising, I just don't think this Utah team is a legitimate threat in the Big 12. Isaiah Wilson did throw for just under 300 yards with a touchdown, but he completed only 50% of his passes, and there were many moments in this game where he looked like he just wasn't ready to be that quarterback that Utah needs at the moment. After losing early in the season to Oregon, Boise State has bounced back nicely as they're proving to be one of the top offenses in all of college football. They took down Washington State, handing them their first loss of the year, defeating them 45-24. And it's largely due to arguably the best running back in the country in Ashton Jeanty. He had an insane performance as he ran for 260 yards with 4 rushing touchdowns. Boise State is currently alive to be the Group of 5 representative in the college football playoff, and it's all because of their amazing running back. As long as he's healthy and on the field getting carries, Boise State can beat anyone on their schedule. I had UNLV in my top 25 a couple weeks ago, but they're officially ranked in the AP poll for the first time in program history. After quarterback drama this past weekend, they had a new starting quarterback in Haj Malik Williams. He had a great debut as he threw for 200 yards yards with 3 passing touchdowns while adding 120 yards on the ground with a rushing score. They dominated Fresno State, winning 59-14. This UNLV team is making a push towards being the best team in program history. They're also still alive in the playoff discussion as well. One of the biggest surprises in all of college football this season is Indiana, who moved to 5-0 on the season with their 42-28 victory over Maryland. Transfer quarterback Curtis Rourke has been one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football this season. He had another fantastic game for the Hoosiers this weekend as he threw for 360 yards and had 3 passing touchdowns. There are a lot of really good teams in the Big Ten this season, but Indiana is making their case as being one of the best. I just talked about this game, but Arizona went on the road and took down number 10 Utah 23-10. Like I said, Utah was missing Cameron Rising, but this is still one of the best all-around teams in college football, especially on defense. Noah Fafita threw for 200 yards and had 2 passing touchdowns. Meanwhile, as a team, the Wildcats ran for just under 200 yards, averaging 6.5 yards per attempt. Arizona had a rough loss a couple weeks ago on the road at Kansas State, but I still believe that this is one of the better teams in the Big 12. Another team that I briefly mentioned earlier was Louisville, who lost on the road to Notre Dame 31-24. Tyler Shuck did all he could as he threw for just under 300 yards with 3 passing touchdowns, but Louisville's defense just couldn't contain Notre Dame as they allowed 21 points in the first quarter that was too much for them to overcome. Wrapping up my top 25 is Texas A&M, who won a close game against Arkansas 21-17. Marcel Reed had a fantastic game as he had 200 total yards of offense with all 3 of Texas A&M's touchdowns. It was a rough start to the season for the Aggies when they fell at home to Notre Dame, but they've now won 4 straight games and they're currently in first place in the SEC with a 2-0 conference record. Well, that wraps it up for today's video. What were your thoughts on my top 25? Was there a team that was ranked too high or a team that was ranked too low? Or was there a team I didn't include at all that should have been in this ranking? Whoever it is, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. I'm posting college football videos all season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, don't forget to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video and my channel with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.